It was a damp Tuesday. The kind of damp that gets into your bones and then applies for residency. I'd been at my desk for 13 hours, 2 of them legally. The coffee was burnt, the wallpaper was peeling, and my ass was chapped. GLC Monster Hotline, you're speaking to Officer Rex Fender. If it swims, slithers, or speaks in Latin, I'm your man.
I just saw it. It was huge. Coils, humps, teeth like piano keys.
Sir, are you describing a lake monster or Gary Busey?
It's heading toward my jet ski.
Ha! Busey doesn't even have a boating license.
I'd like to report a fish that disrespected me.
Go on.
It made eye contact. Then it winked with intention.
Ma'am, it sounds like you've been emotionally compromised by a walleye. Take a hot shower and don't look directly into water for 72 hours. They come in waves. The calls. The loonies. The serpent chasers. The guy who insists his cousin married a Selkie in Wisconsin. And every single one wants closure. Or compensation. Sometimes both.
We're getting the facts over here!
Let's see. A sketch of a sea otter with breasts, labeled Possible Siren. Well, that's better than last week's Sasquatch in a scuba suit.
I just watched something slither out of the lake and into my Honda Civic.
Is it driving?
It's adjusting the mirrors.
Sounds like Busey found a ride home. Sometimes I think the lake's just screwing with us, like it knows we're watching. And every now and then, it sends something up. Not a monster, just a wet, practical joke.
We caught something on Lake Ontario.
What is it?
Looks like a sea cucumber with a comb over. It keeps whispering stock tips.
Sell. Immediately. I've seen things. A bass the size of a speedboat. A heron that recited poetry. One time I got bit by a leech that claimed it was self-defense. Need a little bit of coffee to clear my mind. Wrong cup. That was a semen sample. GLC Monster Hotline, if it's glowing, oozing, or singing show tunes, press 1. You work the Cryptid hotline long enough, you learn what's important. Quick reflexes, a laminated copy of maritime law, and a safe word that the Coast Guard will recognize. In this business, I've seen everything from sea monsters to sea gulls to sea men. And I pray you never know what it's like to be on the clock and covered in semen. The lake never sleeps. The monsters never stop. And I, Rex Fender, will still be out there, taking every call, filing every report, and knowing deep down, if it's got scales, it's got a vendetta. Monster Hotline. No, we don't validate parking. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
And you have waded waist high into the murky lake waters, the fresh waters of Creep Street Podcast. That's right, folks. Woo! Oh, I hope you brought your snorkeling gear, because tonight we are diving into those, they're not even just lakes. Like, how many lakes get called a Great Lake? You know what I mean?
Yeah, how many lakes even have a tide?
Exactly, right. How many lakes actually have their own weather system? And that's exactly what we're diving into today. Gage and I, in Michigan here, we are in the Great Lakes state. We're surrounded on all sides.
All sides. But the South.
That's right. We can always escape into Ohio if we need to. Of course. Worst case, in some cases, I'd rather be eaten by the sea monster. Folks, today's episode is Sea Monsters of the Great Lakes. That's right. Let me go ahead and baptize you in the cool waters of my sources here. I've got a book called Spooky Great Lakes, as well as an article, Bizarre Mystery Monsters of the Great Lakes by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. Oh, that's right, baby. Buckle up. Buckle up and put that snorkeler on.
And put on your life jackets.
That's right. You're going to be hanging on to dear life during this episode, folks. You know, lake monsters are a bit like glitter at a craft store. Once you've noticed one piece, suddenly you're covered in that shit. They're mysterious, they're elusive, and, weirdly, quite common. These strange aquatic anomalies seem to pop up in just about every sizable puddle of water humanity's ever plopped a pontoon into. From the misty Scottish lochs to the backwoods bayous, if there's murky water and a local legend, chances are there's a scaly menace lurking just out of sight in the dark of the night. So, of course, it makes perfect sense that the Great Lakes, those colossal freshwater freaks, those inland seas of North America, would be no exception. And baby, these lakes, oh, mama, they are massive, as well as ancient and deep. And if the stories are to be believed, they're also teeming with things that have no business existing, at least in our realm. Now, let's head due east from where we are now, at least, to Lake Huron. Nestled on the eastern flank of Michigan is where you'll find Old Huron. Once known as Lac des Hurons, it is the second largest of the Great Lakes, a massive, ancient body of water. And if you ask the local Ojibwe, they'll tell you that it's full of not just H2O, but full of darn water spirits as well. Water nymphs, whispering currents, strange creatures creeping just beneath the ripple of the surface. To the casual tourist, that might sound like charming folklore. But those who've spent enough time near the shorelines of Lake Huron, well, they might have other opinions on the matter. Take, for example, the strange tale of a man known only as Sheridan. It was sometime during the 1960s, and this Sheridan fella was out for a day of boating with his family. The kind of quaint family outing that starts with sandwiches in a cooler and ends with sunburns and bleached hair. Their course took them through Saginaw Bay to the mysterious Charity Island, the largest island in Lake Huron. A lush place, it's remote, and just eerie enough to tickle the red flag flare gun. Once they landed, everyone split off to explore the island. Sheridan decided to walk up the shoreline, probably hoping for a little solitude and a good view. But what he got instead was something weird. Sheridan, poor bastard, had barely rounded the bend in the shoreline when something peculiar tugged at his attention. It was the sound of laughter. Soft, musical in tone, drifting in on the lake breeze. Not the cackling of gulls or the creak of pines, but something that sounded unmistakably human. And giddy, of all things. Woohoo! He turned toward the water, his eyes squinting against the sunlight, and that's when he saw them. 3 women. Young, beautiful, and good golly if this trio of lasses wasn't stark naked. Frolicking in the shallows like a Cinemax fever dream. They danced and splashed each other, their laughter rising like the mist in a carefree cadence. These were nymphs from some forgotten woodland myth. There'd been no sign of other people on the island, no boats, no towels, no footprints in the sand, no life's a beach signs. Nevertheless, there they were. Now, Sheridan, being the red-blooded fella in the 1960s that he was, he crouched in the brush and watched these mysterious ladies, like a creep in Bermuda shorts or a peeping Tommy Bahama. But just when he thought this lakeside peep show couldn't get any more surreal, the women all dove beneath the surface. And they never came back up. Not a ripple or a splash. All was silent. So, Sheridan waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and these ladies, they didn't resurface or swim away. It was as if the lake had just opened its arms and swallowed them whole. And suddenly Sheridan wasn't so sure that he'd stumbled upon some group of beauties having a bath, but rather something ancient and not what it appeared to be. Perhaps it was something that had been watching him the entire time. Sheridan never told his family what he'd seen, especially probably because he was there with his wife. Maybe he was afraid they'd mock him, or maybe he just wanted to keep it to himself. Either way, when they returned to Charity Island sometime later, he found himself drifting toward that same shoreline where he had seen the mysterious bathing ladies once before. And sure enough, oh, mama, there they were. The same 3 buxom ladies, naked as hell, laughing and dancing in the surf like they'd stepped out of a dream and hadn't aged a day. Once again, they never seemed to notice him. And just like the time before, after they'd had some fun, they slipped beneath the water and vanished like ghosts. That's when the obsession started. Year after year, Sheridan returned to the island, often alone, always hoping for another glimpse. Sometimes they would appear exactly as he remembered them, with the same faces, the same laughter. They never looked older and never left the water. It was as if they were caught in a time loop of some kind, trapped in some eternal twilight just beneath the waves. And the more he saw them, the less sure he became of anything else. Then one day, as he sat watching the lake, a voice cackled behind him, like a dry twig snapping underfoot. "Watching the ladies, are you?" Startled, Sheridan turned to find an old man standing nearby. Weathered, white-bearded, and eyes like slate, and a voice that sounded like it had been smoking an entire pack of cigs at a time for years. This mysterious fellow hadn't made a sound while approaching. And this rattled Sheridan. Not because someone had caught him oogling the naked ladies, but because this odd conviction, he was the only one who could see them, like they were his haunting. The old man just cackled. "They're nymphs," he said, pointing a gnarled finger towards the surf. "Spirits of the lake. Been here long before you, and they'll be here long after." Sheridan asked what they wanted, and the old man's smile faded, and he said, "They don't want, they lure. They feed off of longing. Young men like you go swimming out to them, thinking they'll finally catch them, and they never come back." And then the mysterious old man, just like those ladies, was gone. No footprints, no boat, just gone into thin air. And just like that, the nymphs stopped appearing to Sheridan. He never saw them again. No matter how many times he returned, no matter how long he waited, the water stayed still and silent. Whatever they were, spirits, visions, or something stranger, they slipped back beneath the lake, leaving Sheridan with only memories and unanswered questions. Yes. Sounds like your typical, like a water nymph of some kind, something that would clearly want to lure, I would assume, is the intent, is to lure unsuspecting victims into the water. This is kind of a tale that's old as time. The sound of the siren singing, so beautiful that it causes ships to run aground. You know, it's It's kind of a tale as old as time. Obviously, there's been many spins put on the idea of the water nymph, but yeah, apparently Lake Huron's got its own bounty of buxom beauties out there, luring men to their death.
The sirens thing definitely popped into my mind, as well as, a lot of nautical legends over the years. When they talk about mermaids, the mermaids sound like sirens. They're kind of the same way. It sounds like they all kind of speak to the same entity.
Right, exactly. And they all, at least when it comes to men, seem to call to that primal nature, whether it's just being naked or it's just like a beautiful song, like something that calms, lures one, especially men, into their...
Almost hypnotizes them.
Right, exactly. I remember What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show that's based on the movie. Excellent show, but they have an episode where they run across sirens out in the water, and it's super, super funny. Super funny.
Yeah, I remember vaguely them depicted in The Lighthouse. They come across as very terrifying.
Yes, that's a great point. That's a good depiction of that I forgot about. Yes, Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse is great movie, and yeah, a great depiction of that myth. And side note, in case people haven't heard, Robert Eggers, director of The Witch, Nosferatu, The Lighthouse, The Northman, he's going to be doing A Christmas Carol. I cannot wait to see what he does with that. That'll be great. Well, folks, let's pay a visit to the big guy. We're going to head on north to Lake Superior, the largest of the Great Lakes.
And the most pretentious.
Right? Come on. Huron's an opening act. He's like, Lake Superior's the type that would demand purple M&Ms in their rider before a show,
Yeah, Superior's the type who will explain to you when it's who and when it's whom.
Absolutely. Well, folks, not only is it the largest of the Great Lakes, it is an inland sea so massive it could swallow entire cities. A body of water so vast it creates its own weather. The Lake of Storms, as it is commonly known, is more than 31,000 square miles of cold, fresh water stretching across international borders like a liquid Leviathan. In fact, Lake Superior holds 10% of all the surface fresh water on Earth, and it behaves less like a lake and more like an ancient sleeping god. And Superior doesn't like to be awakened, let's just say that. You see, to the Ojibwe and other native peoples of the region, Lake Superior was always a sacred place. A place of power and mystery and, yes, monsters. The lake itself has moods and rules. You don't mess with and you don't underestimate it. And yet, folks do. Sometimes folks do. Because the thing about Lake Superior is, it doesn't just host the legendary Mishapishu, the water panther of Ojibwe legend, with its copper horns and wicked temperament. No. It's also home to stories that go far beyond folklore. We're talking real and modern reports, newspaper clippings, eyewitness accounts, whole ships disappearing. People seeing things that don't belong in any lake or even on this earth. Things without names, and some with names we dare not speak. They're tales of shimmering forms rising from the waves only to vanish like a mist. Ships that reported collisions with nothing they could see. Unexplained lights below the waterline. And in at least one case, something described as, quote, a living pipeline with teeth. The stuff of Lovecraftian nightmares. So while tourists might snap photos of beautiful sunsets and lighthouses, the locals and the lake herself remember the darkness that it is capable of. They know that this place is ancient, haunted, and in some ways alive. So let's rewind all the way back to May of 1782. The American Revolution is still smoldering. Powdered wigs are still in fashion and fur trading is the hot gig. A merchant named Venet Saint Germain, and no, it's not related to the immortal French Saint Germain, the one we've been requested many times to do, and we will do it soon. The Count of Saint Germain is a great tale, but no, this is a different Saint Germain. This guy was making a routine trip across Lake Superior with 3 companions and an old Ojibwe woman as their guide and interpreter. Their destination that night was Pie Island, and yes, just like it sounds, P-I-E, pie in the sky, baby. A humble, pine-cloaked blip of land between Isle Royale and the Canadian shoreline. Just a stopover, a place to catch some fish, stoke a fire, and sleep under the stars. Well, things got weird fast for Saint Germain. As the others returned to camp to get the fire going, Germain and the Ojibwe woman lingered by the water, taking in that dusky Superior sunset, the kind that turns the lake to glass and the sky into a beautiful bruised gold. It was quiet, still, and beautiful. And then they saw it. Something was out there on the lake, and boy, it was moving fast. At first, it looked like driftwood. A big one, maybe, rolling slow through the waves. But then it breached the surface and kept breaching the surface, rising higher and higher out of the water. Higher, wider, longer, far too long for any fish, too smooth for a whale, too real to be any mirage. The thing undulated like it was swimming without actually displacing water, so it's like it rose up into the air but kept moving in a way that you would think of like a serpent moving through water, but now it was kind of like almost halfway in the air. And as it rose, they could make out the gleam of scales in the fading light. The Ojibwe woman gripped Germain's arm, whispering something under her breath, words that didn't need translating, words that meant, "We are not alone." As the creature slid silently back beneath the water, the two of them stood frozen, their lungs tight with air, and the air around them suddenly too cold to even breathe. Neither of them spoke until they were back at the fire, and even then it was only the woman who said, quote, "Some things are older than the lake, and hungry." Well, Saint Germain would later recount the story with precision. He was a merchant, after all, a man who kept records and ledgers. He had no time for fairy tales, but that night, Pie Island made a believer out of him. Sworn to oath under the official judges of the Court of King's Bench for the District of Montreal, the following testimony was given by Germain. That a little before sunset, the evening being clear and serene, Deponent was returning from setting his nets and reached his encampment a short time after the sun went down. That is, on embarking, the Deponent happened to turn towards the lake, when he observed, about an acre or 3/4 of an acre distant from the bank where he stood, an animal in the water, which appeared to him to have the upper part of its body above the waist, formed exactly like that of a human being. It had the half of its body out of the water, and the novelty of so extraordinary a spectacle excited his attention and led him to examine it carefully. That the body of the animal seemed to him about the size of that of a child of 7 or 8 years of age, with one of its arms extended and elevated in the air. The hand appeared to be composed of fingers exactly similar to those of a man, and the right arm was kept in an elevated position, while the left seemed to rest upon the hip. But the Deponent did not see the latter, it being kept under the water. The Deponent distinctly saw the features of the countenance, which bore an exact resemblance of those of a human face. The eyes were extremely brilliant, the nose small but handsomely shaped, the mouth proportionate to the rest of the face, the complexion of a brownish hue, the hair grayish-black in color, the ears well-formed and corresponding to the other parts of the figure. Its body was covered in a woolly substance that looked to be an inch long. The animal looked the deponent in the face with an aspect indicating uneasiness, but at the same time with a mixture of curiosity. And the deponent, along with 3 other men who were with him at the time, and an old native woman to whom he had given a passage in his canoe, attentively examined the animal for the space of 3 or 4 minutes. An animal similar to that which deponent described as being seen by another voyager on another occasion when passing from Pate to Neri. The deponent thinks the frequent appearances of this extraordinary animal in the spot has given rise to the superstitious belief among the natives that the god of the waters had fixed upon this for his residence. Now, it's a little difficult to read because it's written in late 18th century vernacular. Almost every line starts with that da-da-da with a da-da-da. But anyway, so this sounds like not just merman-like, but almost like mer-apish. Like it's got like fur almost, like a mer-sapien sort of.
Oh, yeah, that's a good off-the-cuff term for it. I mean, they describe the woolly substance that's about an inch long. Yeah, it doesn't sound like your typical depiction of a mer person.
Right. And keep in mind, as its upper half left the water, it still continued to undulate as if it was like, I almost imagine like when your character glitches in a game and it glitches in the wall and it's still like running, but it's stuck or something. It's almost like that, like it glitched and it was still like swimming, doing the swimming motion, but half in the air.
Right. What does that mean about how it's able to move?
Exactly.
That's really strange.
Very strange. Now, Germain, our fur trading friend of 1782, he wasn't the kind of man to rattle easy. He knew the wilderness well, and he knew its inhabitants and their habits. He knew which animals to shoot and which ones to just pretend you didn't see. But when he laid his eyes on that thing out on Lake Superior, mama, all bets were off. It wasn't just big, and it wasn't just strange. It was something that should be impossible. A serpentine mass undulating silently across the mirror still waters, shimmering in the dusk like wet obsidian. And as it lingered, staring back at them with some kind of cool lake-born intelligence, something primal stirred in Germain's gut. He did what any rugged man of his time might do. He grabbed his damn rifle. And that might have been his last bad decision had it not been for the old Ojibwe woman by his side to knock some sense into him. Before he could raise the barrel and take aim, she clutched his arm with fingers like iron and hissed a warning. This was no fish, she told him, no mere beast of land or sea. This was the Meme Gwashi, a sacred water spirit said to dwell in the cracks and caves of Lake Superior's bedrock. They were the keepers of the storms, watchers of travelers, tricksters, and sometimes even protectors. But they were always powerful. She told him they could summon lightning, command the waves, even bring death with a thought if offended. Well, Saint Germain, ever the Enlightenment era rationalist, scoffed. Mumbo jumbo, he likely thought, right before yanking himself free and turning back to take aim. But as he did, the lake was empty, and whatever had vanished had done so without so much as disturbing the water. It was smooth, not a ripple in sight. That night, the group settled in to camp. The sky cracked open. A tempest swept across the lake with a fury fit for Homer's epic tales. Howling winds, sheets of rain, bolts of lightning that split the night like a gunshot. It was the kind of storm that didn't just roll in, but seemed to almost be summoned. Even after surviving the deluge, Saint Germain remained skeptical. Lightning? Ha! Coincidence! Monsters? Please! But he did admit something real had been out there. Something that did not belong. He started calling it a merman, as if that somehow made it any more normal. In the years that followed, Jermaine became obsessed with the creature. He searched for it with every chance he got. However, Jermaine always came up empty, never shaking the memory of what he saw. And as it turns out, he wasn't alone. Other fur traders, grizzled men with no time for bullshit, claimed to have seen something similar. A long body, human-like face, gleaming skin, and eyes that didn't blink. Whatever it was, it haunted him till the day he died. Some said it was a spirit that he saw that day with the old Ojibwe woman. Some say it was a monster. Some just thought it was lake madness, too much time spent on the water. But up on Lake Superior, when the fog rolls low and the wind dies down just right, you can feel something watching. Yeah, so not the buxom beauties of Lake Huron. Instead, a hairy, kind of hard to explain. I almost like a Mersapien is what I would call it. Like a half hairy humanoid with fish-like. It would be interesting if they got to see the full second half of it, if it had fins like a typical mermaid, or if it was something else.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. It's hard to know what to make of it without seeing the entire thing.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Ooh, just had to take a quick pause there, Creep Street, just to give your poor palpitating heart a rest. If you're enjoying this episode, go ahead and follow us on Facebook, Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod, TikTok at Creep Street Podcast. That's right. And if once a week is not enough for you, just head on over to patreon.com for all sorts of goodies. We got 3 different tiers there, something for every tier. So get your fixins. We even got a free tier where you can listen to the weekly sketches before they go live on the episode. Now, without further ado, back to today's story. Well, we got another tale about 100 years later in 1886. And this is the true tale of the divers of Copper Island up there in Lake Superior. There was a group of prospectors that arrived at one of the lake's many islands in search of copper. Northern Michigan is an area famous for it. Long before Europeans had ever touched the shoreline, native peoples had been mining copper from the cliffs, sometimes with such skill and sophistication that it even stumps modern geologists onto how they could do so expertly. So anyway, these prospectors, both greedy and hopeful, came loaded with their pickaxes, pans, and one absolute showstopper, a heavy-duty canvas diving suit complete with brass fittings and a breathing line. They were ready to go full Jules Verne to get that precious copper. Their first day was pretty standard. Scouting terrain, testing equipment, delegating who would go down first into the depths, and maybe a nip or two from an old whiskey bottle for courage. By sundown, they had set up camp right at the edge of the water, eager to start their aquatic treasure hunt at dawn. But then, the night got weird. It began, as it usually does on the lakes, with the wind. One moment, the night was still as a crypt. The next, the wind was howling like a drunk banshee. Then came the sounds of splashing, slithering movements in the shadows, and, most unsettling of all, a rhythmic tapping sound echoing out across the water. Tap, tap, tap. Not like metal on metal, mind you, more like tapping on bone. One of the men swore he saw movement just beyond the tree line, something tall, lanky, and almost glossy. Another claimed he saw a pair of red eyes peering at them from the lake. Well, hardened prospectors that they were, they laughed it off the best they could, of course. They passed the flask around a few more times for courage, stoked the fire, and tried to sleep. But by morning, things just weren't feeling right. The diving suit was mysteriously torn. And not just torn like it got snagged on something, but shredded. like it had been worked over by a school of angry shears. The brass fittings were dented and twisted as if something had crushed them with an inhuman strength. And the line, the one meant to supply oxygen, was snapped clean in two. There was no way that they'd let that go unexplained. Perhaps it was a bear, one of them guessed, and a big one at that, but another whispered, quote, "Didn't sound like no bear." Needless to say, they never dove for copper that day. They were packed up by noon and left the island behind, copper be damned. But before they did, one man walked to the shoreline alone, where the water met the rocks. And there, half buried in the silt, was a smooth chunk of native copper, gleaming like fire under glass. Right next to it, the imprint of something big, something that wasn't human or machine. And as he turned to leave, the wind kicked up once more, and he thought he heard a voice. One whispered in a tongue he didn't recognize. Well, as the team of copper-hungry prospectors huddled close around their fire in a new location, one of them peeled off to gather some more firewood. Of course, that's when he saw it. Out past the shallows, maybe 100 feet from the shore, a light began to bloom beneath the surface. Not a reflection of a bonfire or even the moonlight. This was something else, a vibrant, pulsating green light that spread like an ink stain across the water, 30 feet wide and growing. He froze in terrified awe, then bolted back to the camp, shouting for the others. They rushed to the shoreline, half expecting to find a sunken lantern or maybe one of the others playing a joke, but no, there it was for all of them to see, glowing like some submerged alien heart, throbbing with light and rhythm and intention. Now these were frontiermen, of course. They were tough, practical, the kinds of guys who'd punch a rattlesnake just to unwind after a long day. But even they knew when something was above their pay grade. Still, old instincts die hard. And one of them, a man named Rennie, grabbed his rifle, raised it to his shoulder, and fired a single round straight into the center of the glow. The moment the shot hit the water, the light vanished. Gone. It didn't fade out, just like a candle snuffed into the void. The men stood there in silence, listening for any hint of movement, any waves, bubbles, or even screams from a disturbed lake god. But nothing came. No retaliation or reply. Just the soft lapping of water and the sudden realization that something beneath them might be watching them. Well, that night, no one slept. They posted watch in pairs, rifles loaded, eyes fixed on the lake, but the glow never returned. Not that night, anyway. The next morning, our brave but arguably short-sighted prospectors shook off the night's weirdness with a couple of mouthfuls of black coffee and the kind of blind gumption only men with pickaxes and no life insurance could muster. After all, this was copper country, baby, and back in 1886, copper was the ticket. The promise of fat paydays and mineral rights spoke louder than any warnings about Ojibwe lake spirits or phantom lights from the deep. So they set out, hauling their barge to a promising site offshore. Having performed the job many times, they prepped their diving gear for submersion, a massive canvas suit that looked more like a portable death trap than a tool of industry. It was all held together with iron rings and a thick brass helmet that could double as a mailbox. The diver, poor bastard, climbed into this thing like a man climbing into his own tomb and was slowly lowered into the water. 30 feet down he went, swaying like a heavy marionette as the lake swallowed him whole. A hose fed him air from the surface as darkness enveloped him. Once at the bottom, it didn't take long. The diver radioed with hand signals and then tugs on the line. He found something, a vein of copper threading through the rocks and disappearing into the lake bed like a trail of buried treasure. He followed the copper vein step by step into the murky depths. The water grew darker, colder, and quieter. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. And yet he kept on, the copper vein teasing him further into the gloom. And that's when it happened. Something moved. Not fast, not even menacing, but something shifted in the silt, far off in the peripheral vision of his brass helmet. And suddenly, the air hose gave a jerk. Above, the men on the barge stopped joking. Something had tugged the line, and maybe it wasn't copper. Now, friends, you've got to hand it to the guy who signs up to put on a 19th century diving suit just to lumber into a pitch-black underwater cave in what amounts to be a weighted burlap sack with a mailbox on his head. This is someone made of sterner stuff than most, but even the stoutest nerves have a snapping point. And that point, it usually arrives right about when the lights blink out and the world goes black. And that's what happened to our diver. Just as he was ready to call it a day, his suit's light fizzled out. No flicker or warning, just gone like it had been snuffed out. Now imagine that feeling. Deep underwater, you just saw something move and your lights go out. So now, even though you can breathe, you're in this suit that's heavy as hell. You don't know what's out there. All you can hear is the sound of your own breathing inside of your suit. Imagine that just blackness. Imagine that terror. Now, this is the part where the audience starts shifting in their seats, because 30 feet under Lake Superior is one thing, but being 30 feet under in a cavern with your only light gone and no visibility and your only tether to the living world a rubber hose that feels like it was sold at a Tractor Supply, that's the part where things stop being adventurous and fun and start becoming horrifying. But the diver, he played it cool. He tried not to panic, at least not yet. He did what most would do. He slowly started following the air tube, hand over hand, trusting that this glorified garden hose would lead him back to daylight and dry socks. He shuffled along slowly, carefully, one metal boot at a time, just holding on to that hose. And then he bumped into something. And it wasn't rock or coral. Wasn't the jagged bottom of an ancient shipwreck. No, this was soft and warm and wet in a way that wasn't just water. He later called it, quote, a living, fleshy thing. Now, there are very few situations in which a living, fleshy thing is a comforting phrase, especially when it's lurking unseen in the sunless depths of Lake Superior. This thing didn't move in response, though, to his bumping into it, but it did feel alive, like it was a giant sleeping Leviathan. Whatever it was, the diver didn't wait around to ask its name. He kicked off the cavern wall and scrambled backwards through the dark, tugging furiously on the hose. The crew topside, hearts fearful for their comrade, yanked him up, like his and their lives depended on it, because maybe this day it very well did. Yes, it's one thing to find yourself in a cavern 30 feet beneath Lake Superior with the lights out. It's quite another to realize that the cavern wall you were feeling your way along as a guide in the dark wasn't a cavern wall at all. This thing the poor diver thought was an underwater cave wall in the dark, it moved. And not with a slow creak of stone under pressure, but with the sudden, unnatural fluidity of something very much alive and very, very big, and apparently not thrilled to be poked in the dark by a brass-helmeted copper miner. At first, the diver did what anyone would do. He told himself, it's just a wall. It's just a wall, a warm, veiny, possibly breathing wall. but a wall nonetheless. Surely he had not brushed up against something so vastly large. But while denial is a powerful survival tool, that illusion shattered when the whole thing lit up, bathing the surrounding gloom in an unholy green glow that had no business coming from anything made of flesh, and the glow pulsated. Well, panic hit hard. The diver screamed into his suit's telephone system, likely a 2-cent tin speaker duct taped into the helmet by the lowest bidder. Topside, the crew would later say that the screams of the diver sounded like a blender full of profanity and static. As the man scrambled backwards, the hose, his very lifeline, his one-way ticket to oxygen and the world above, snagged on something, holding it tight, and that's when the eye appeared. Not two eyes, but one massive eye watching him. The diver was seized by a pure animalistic terror, like a gnat realizing he's in the spider's web. The diver pulled out his knife and jammed it forward, plunging the blade into whatever passed as an iris in this giant eye. The thing shuddered violently, soundlessly, and quaked, causing a ripple through the water and up the hose. What followed was chaos. When the blade hit flesh, the lake exploded with light. That dim, pulsing glow the diver had seen before now blazed into something blinding. Green fire underwater. And from that radioactive halo emerged a thing so terrible, so impossibly big it didn't have one eye. It had many, plural, massive, unblinking eyes, more than a dozen tentacles snaking in all directions. The creature had wedged itself fully into the mouth of the cavern now, blocking the diver's exit. No more following the copper trail, no more heading back to the barge, just meat and panic and one very small knife against an abysmal calamity with rave lighting. And so began the dance. The diver slashed wildly, desperately, spinning in that cumbersome canvas diving suit, slicing at whatever rubbery limbs slithered too close. For every tentacle he hit, it seemed two more whipped toward him like angry eels. The fear was disorienting. The thing's whole body shimmered with nodules of green light, flashing in strange patterns. Every pulse sent a new wave of nausea and confusion washing over the man, like he was trapped inside a haunted lava lamp. The beast lashed out, tentacles wrapping around the diver's limbs, tugging at his oxygen hose, wrenching at his helmet like it was trying to open a cold beer. At some point in the melee, something went wrong with the diver's oxygen supply. Maybe the tentacles crimped it, or maybe the whole hose was yanked loose. Either way, water began trickling into the man's helmet. And nothing says time to wrap it up quite like lake water dripping into your sea diving helmet. With cold water creeping in and consciousness slipping out, the diver knew he had one shot left. He slashed wildly with the last bit of strength he had, and in a final surge, powered by adrenaline and pure uncut terror, he managed to sever one of the beast's tentacles. The result was immediate. The monster reeled back with a screeching pulse of green light, tentacles writhing, and just like that it vanished, slipping away, back into the black like a bad memory. Its glow fading into the depths, leaving nothing but a swirling silt cloud and a severed tentacle thrashing in the water like a snake having an existential crisis. The only thing keeping the diver alive was sheer luck and a rusted diver's knife, and his body instinctively doing all it could to resist. Above, the crew saw the bubbles, and then came the screams, and then nothing. And then suddenly, the hose went taut. With one last pull, the diver broke the surface, screaming, his limbs slashing about. The crew dragged him into the boat like a hooked shark. The suit he wore was torn to shreds. The metal helmet was dented like an aluminum can, and the knife was gone. Still somewhere down there, maybe lodged in the eye of a creature best left alone. His crew hauled him up, finding his hose stretched so tight that it had nearly flipped the entire vessel like a cranky turtle. Apparently, the fight below had been so fierce, it rocked the boat so violently, one man even claimed that the barge had lurched several feet sideways, as if the lake itself had tried to take it down. The diver thankfully survived, but barely, and he never dove again. In fact, he never spoke more than a few words for the rest of his life. The crew never went back either. Forget that copper. Whatever was down there wasn't worth it. The tale first surfaced in the Manitowoc Pilot, tucked beneath ads for liver tonics and hat brushes. But the legend grew legs over the years, spreading to other local papers and eventually entering the strange scrapbook of Great Lakes legends. Some say the piece of severed tentacle was preserved. Others say the story was pure hokum. But that part doesn't matter, because once a monster swims into the public consciousness, it stays there. Oh man, I mean, that is, wow. That is by far, I think, the most terrifying tale. I mean, God, what a nightmare that would be. Absolute nightmare.
This thing must have been absolutely massive, too, because even when he was able to see again, at first he only thought it had the one eye.
Right, exactly.
I mean, it must have been enormous.
Enormous. Truly Lovecraftian in a way. Almost like a Cthulhu-like thing.
And I mean, clearly it really traumatized the guy, too. The fact that he barely spoke the rest of his life.
Right.
I mean, this must have been a really harrowing experience.
Absolutely. He probably saw it everywhere he looked for the rest of his life, you know? I mean, I'm sure something like that just sticks with you, and yeah. Well, folks, it doesn't stop there, because as we know, Lake Superior isn't just big, it's intimidating. When you consider that it alone holds 10% of the world's surface freshwater. The Ojibwe called Lake Superior Gichigami, or Great Sea. And when a body of water gets a name like that, honey, it's about more than just size. It's because the place feels alive. And for centuries, the native tribes of the region spoke of a beast that called the place home. They called it Mishipishu, sometimes also pronounced as Mishabishu. They described the Mishipishu as an underwater panther, part serpent, part lion, part cosmic nightmare. Pictographs show it with a long, slithering body covered in spikes and barbs and a face that's pretty much indescribable. Probably not pretty to look at.
Not getting a lot of swipe rights in Lake Tinder.
That's right. Mishipishu better try plenty of fish.
Yeah.
Mishipishu, we'll call it Mishi for short. Mishi didn't just exist, it ruled the waters of Lake Superior. It was known to snatch deer off of the shore, even drag the occasional unlucky person down into the depths. The kind of creature that made you think twice before skinny dipping with a summer fling. In certain areas of the lake, particularly the parts the tribes had warned about, certain places you just don't go no matter the circumstance. And if you absolutely had to cross one of these forbidden zones, you didn't just hop in a canoe and wing it. You made offerings to the spirits, tobacco, prayers, and the like. Even missionaries reported seeing local tribes make sacrifices before venturing out. But Mishipishu, or Mishi, wasn't just a creature of ancient legend. No, not by a long shot. Ever since the earliest settlers arrived, and right on into the modern age, there have been eerie sightings of something large, dark, and serpentine churning just beneath the waves. Reports describe a creature sizing up to 75 feet long, with a whole whale-like tail and a horse-like head, and a thick muscular neck that rises up like a periscope of nightmares. dark green, sometimes black. Always massive and always watching. It reminds me a lot of the Kelpies, which we've talked about. Multiple people across the centuries all tried describing this thing as something that sounds like a prehistoric basilisk. It's a tenant of Lake Superior and one that doesn't like visitors. Some of the earliest outsider accounts of the Lake Superior monster come not from loggers, miners, or sailors, but from men of the cloth. We're talking missionaries here. Back in the 1600s, when men wore ruffled collars and thought that thunder was a sign of God being pissed off, tales began to circulate about a creature living beneath the glacial waters of Gichigami. One such man was Father Paul Lejeune, a Jesuit missionary who, in the 17th century, was said to have witnessed something that would put a little extra spice into your average Sunday sermon. According to the account, Father Lejeune saw local tribes capture what he described as a lizard-like fish around 10 feet long with the head of a turtle. The people of the tribe were clearly unsettled and didn't hesitate. They promptly tossed that ugly bastard back into the lake because in their tradition, harming one of these beasts was a surefire way to summon a violent storm. Flash forward a couple centuries and Lake Superior's cryptid activity starts picking up a little bit of steam. And rather literally, too. Steamers, as in steam-powered ships, would start spotting the beast. In 1894, not one but two separate steamer crews making their way between Whitefish Point and Copper Harbor, Michigan, reported seeing what can only be described as an aquatic Leviathan with an arched back jutting 7 feet out of the water. The following year, in July of 1895, another crew near Whitefish Point spotted what they described as something hideous cutting through the waves. It had a 15-foot neck and a jaw that would make a crocodile blush. Making it even weirder, it seemed to keep pace with the ship, almost like it was escorting or even stalking the vessel. And then came 1897, the year the creature got handsy near Duluth, Minnesota, when a man was enjoying a lovely little yacht outing, starched collars, cigars, the works, when the guy fell overboard. Not great for the Ralph Lauren knit sweater. But things quickly escalated when he claimed that something down in the water below him, something massive, wrapped around him like a python and tried to pull him under. 3 other people on board claimed they saw it happen, which means either they were all in on an elaborate prank, or this guy got his first and nearly last close-up with whatever beast rules those frigid depths. And whatever it was, Lake Superior's monster isn't just a myth. It's got many, many sightings, and it goes by many names. And if the old stories are to be believed, it's got a bit of a temper. Now, if you thought the 1800s were the golden age of Great Lakes weirdness, don't worry, because things kept up plenty spooky well into the 20th century. Let's hop ahead to the 1930s, where we find ourselves off the shore of Pictured Rocks in Munising, Michigan, a place known for its natural beauty, breathtaking cliffs, and apparently lake serpents with an Olympic swim time. Witnesses in the area describe a massive, humpbacked creature, serpentine in nature, moving at a high speed, kicking up the wake. According to reports, this wasn't just some lazy drift through the shallows. No, this thing was hauling ass, as if it was trying to outswim the Great Depression. Now fast forward a few more decades to the 1960s and things weren't any less weird. A family near Sugar Island, situated in the St. Mary's River, claimed they saw an immense, humped creature glide past the north coast with no noise, no theatrics, just a colossal aquatic anomaly cruising along like it owned the place. But the creme de la creme encounter came in 1977 when a hiker named Randy Braun claimed he had a close encounter of the reptilian kind right off the shoreline of the Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park. Now, the porcupines aren't known for being especially forgiving terrain. You're out there dodging black flies and hungry bears. So when Randy stumbled across something large, humpbacked, and very much alive in the water, well, it left an impression. Details of Braun's Memorial Day encounter are scant, but what's clear is that it shook him. Here is what he described seeing.
When I looked straight out into the open water, I saw two very distinct dark bumps, which seemed to be separated by just a few feet. First one bump would go underwater, then the next bump would do the same. But only after the first one surfaced. I had a 20-time spotting scope with me and couldn't quite make out what they were. They then began to move east, and to my left, one bump going under, and then the other, but one bump always stayed on top of the water, while the other submerged. It became frightfully apparent to me that this object was close to 1,000 feet out, and as it gained speed, I realized there was a third smaller bump, and that object was undulating. It moved very rapidly, to the east, and quartered towards and nearly up to the shore. The now obviously living thing stopped maybe several hundred feet from me and began moving and weaving around the large boulders that were in the water and directly towards me. It was big, and it resembled an anaconda with a girth of a Volkswagen. Don't laugh, it wasn't funny. There was no way.
That's literally in the quote. That's funny.
There was nowhere to go for me because of the slippery slope and the water barrier, so I just jumped behind the boulder and grabbed my 35mm Yashica. As it moved towards me, it slowed down considerably, but was making a noticeable wake. It was strangely quiet when it snaked towards me and stopped dead in the water again right in front of me. It was big, and I steadied my camera on top of the rock and fired one picture but was afraid to move after that. The thing sat there for about 30 seconds with its huge horse-shaped head and large dark left eyes staring at me. On the nose was a visible catfish-type whisker, maybe 2 feet in length and wiggling.
So think about that. He was saying that it looked like it had a horse head.
Right.
Like a Kelpie. There's the Kelpie thing again. There's a story from ancient Celtic folklore we've covered many times. This idea of originally it would lure children. Children would see what they thought was just a wild horse, like a pony, and they would climb on and ride it, and then the thing would rush out to sea and drown the child. Or a person too, but it was typically aimed at children a lot because, like we've kind of discovered here on Creep Street, some of the scariest legends were created by mothers just to get their kids to behave. But yeah, I mean, these Great Lakes, there's a reason they call them great. And let me tell you, folks, even though we're ending it here, we only covered Huron and Superior. Over on our Patreon this month, are you going to get Michigan, Ontario, and Erie? Yes. Gage, what did you think? Are you going to think twice before dipping your toes into those Great Lakes?
I'll dip my toes, but probably closer to the shoreline, for sure. We talk often about how few things have been discovered in the ocean.
Right.
But when you consider, like, the size of the Great Lakes, it wouldn't surprise me at all if there are tons of things down there that we've never discovered, or at least documented.
Right.
And I looked it up. I was curious what the largest known animal is in the Great Lakes. And apparently it's just the lake sturgeon fish, which has been recorded reaching as large as 7 feet long and 300 pounds. But especially considering the size of the Great Lakes and things as big as they are in the ocean, I would not be surprised whatsoever if there are some even larger undocumented things in the Great Lakes, probably what these people have reported seeing.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, I'll tell you what, Gage. Just like the lake that resides north of Michigan, Lake Superior, I got a list superior.
Oh yeah? Of who?
The names of our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Serve Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Vieren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Ghoulish Gert Hankum, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, the Antagonist Andrew Park, the Monstrous Michaela Schur, the Witchy Wonder J.P. Weimer, the Freaky Ben Forsyth, the Barbaric Andrew Barry, the Mysterious Marcella, the Hellacious Cale Hoffman, and Pugblorb, the Poltergeist. Oh, God, I just came up for air. Wow. Man, that, whew, almost drowned down there.
We went deep today.
We did. We sure did. Whew, folks. Of course, follow us on all the socials and whatnot. And if you want to be just like that great group of sailors, head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for all sorts of goodies. We love you and we thank you so much for all your support. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gay Charlie.
Good night and goodbye.